I've always dreamed of being the first to set foot on a new world, the first to make a groundbreaking discovery, the first to etch my name in the annals of space exploration. But as I stand here on the frozen surface of Titan, Saturn's largest moon, I realize that being first isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's a curse. My name is Dr. Ilara Chen, and I'm about to tell you why humanity should have never come to Titan. The year is 2169, and Earth has changed. We've spread across the solar system like an unstoppable virus, colonizing Mars, establishing outposts in the upper atmosphere of Venus, and setting up research stations on Jupiter's moons. But the outer planets, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn, remained largely unexplored, until now. I remember the day they announced the Titan mission. I was in my lab on Mars, analyzing data from the latest core samples when the news came through. A joint mission between the United Earth Space Agency and the Mars Colonial Union to explore Titan. A dream come true. I knew I had to be on that team. That night, I couldn't sleep. The red Martian landscape outside my window seemed to pulse with possibility. I paced my small quarters, my mind racing with thoughts of Titan's methane lakes, its thick atmosphere, its potential for harboring life. As the first light of the Martian dawn crept through my window, I made my decision. I would do whatever it took to be on that mission. The selection process was grueling. Hundreds of the best scientists and astronauts from Earth and Mars all competing for just 2 spots. Days blurred into weeks as we underwent rigorous physical and psychological evaluations, simulations, and interviews. I still remember the final interview. The panel of stern-faced officials sat before me, their eyes scrutinizing every twitch, every blink. "Dr. Chen," one of them began, her voice crisp and cold, "why should we choose you for this mission?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Because Titan isn't just another moon to me. It's the key to understanding our place in the universe. I've dedicated my life to studying its potential for harboring life, its unique atmospheric composition. I don't just want to go to Titan, I need to go. It's not ambition driving me. It's a calling. The room fell silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. Then, a slight nod from the lead interviewer. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. We'll be in touch." Weeks passed. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the gnawing uncertainty. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, as I was calibrating a spectroscope, my comm unit buzzed. A message from USA headquarters. With trembling fingers, I opened it. "Congratulations, Dr. Ilara Chen. You have been selected as the lead scientist for the Titan exploration mission." I collapsed into my chair, a mix of elation and terror washing over me. I was going to Titan. I was going to be the first. Launch day came faster than expected. The spaceport was a hive of activity, technicians swarming over the sleek form of the Prometheus, our state-of-the-art spacecraft. As I approached the launch pad, I saw him for the first time in person, Commander Jack Harper, the other half of our 2-person crew. He was tall, with a weather-beaten face that spoke of countless hours in the unforgiving vacuum of space. His eyes, a startling blue, crinkled at the corners as he smiled and extended his hand. "Dr. Chen, I presume." Jack Harper. "Looking forward to our little road trip." I shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip. "Ilara, please. And I wouldn't exactly call 18 months in deep space a little road trip." He laughed, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to ease some of the tension in the air. "Ah, but where's your sense of adventure, Doc? We're about to go where no one's gone before. It'll be a walk in the park." As we boarded the Prometheus, I couldn't shake the feeling that his bravado was masking something, a flicker of doubt, perhaps. But there was no time to dwell on it. We had a mission to start. The countdown began. I strapped myself into my seat, my heart racing. Jack's voice came over the intercom, steady and calm. "All right, Doc. Here we go. See you on the other side." The engines ignited with a roar that shook the entire craft. G-forces pressed me back into my seat as we accelerated, climbing higher and higher. Through the viewport, I watched as the red Martian landscape fell away, replaced by the star-studded blackness of space. As the shaking subsided and we settled into our trajectory, a sense of finality washed over me. There was no going back now. At first, Jack was easy to get along with, always cracking jokes, sharing stories about his previous missions. Our days fell into a routine: system checks, data analysis, physical exercise to counteract the effects of zero gravity. But as the weeks turned into months, I noticed a change in him. It started subtly. He'd fall silent mid-sentence, his gaze drifting to the viewport. Sometimes, I'd find him floating in the observation dome, staring out at the vast emptiness of space, his expression unreadable. One night, or what passed for night in the eternal darkness of space, I found him there again. He didn't seem to notice me at first, his eyes fixed on the distant pinprick of light that was Saturn. "You okay, Jack?" I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. He turned to me slowly, his eyes shadowed. "You ever wonder if we're meant to be out here, Ilara? If maybe there are some places in the universe that should stay unexplored?" I tried to laugh it off, but the sound came out forced. "Come on, Jack. Where's that sense of adventure you were talking about?" He didn't smile. "Adventure's one thing. This is something else. Sometimes I feel like we're not heading towards Titan, we're heading towards something else. Something waiting for us." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, as if trying to clear it. "Nothing. Forget I said anything. Just space madness, I guess." He pushed off the wall, floating towards the exit. "I'm going to try to get some sleep. You should too, Doc. Big day tomorrow." As he left, I turned to look out at the stars. They seemed colder somehow, more distant. And for the first time since we'd left Mars, I felt truly, terrifyingly alone. The incident marked a turning point in our journey. The easy camaraderie we'd shared in the early months gave way to long stretches of silence. Jack retreated into himself, spending more and more time alone in his quarters. When we did interact, his responses were clipped, his smiles forced. I tried to focus on my work, running simulations of Titan's atmosphere, analysing the latest data from our long-range sensors. But the silence of the ship pressed in on me, broken only by the soft hum of the life support systems and the occasional ping of incoming transmissions from Earth. One day, about 14 months into our journey, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I found Jack in the mess hall, pushing his rehydrated food around his plate. "We need to talk," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, his eyes wary. "About what?" "About this thing between us. This silence. Jack, we're the only two people out here. We can't keep going on like this." He was quiet for a long moment, and then sighed. "You're right. I'm sorry, Ilara, it's just... The further we get from Earth, the more I feel like we're heading into something we're not prepared for. And the dreams... I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. He nodded, his eyes distant. "Almost every night now, I see Titan, but it's wrong. There are things there, things that shouldn't exist, and they're waiting for us." I wanted to dismiss it as stress, as the psychological strain of deep space travel. But something in his voice, in the haunted look in his eyes, made me pause. "Tell me about the dreams," I said softly, and as he began to speak, describing visions of ancient structures and lurking horrors, I felt a creeping dread settle over me. Because deep down, in a part of myself I'd been trying to ignore, I realized I'd been having the same dreams too. We landed on Titan with a bone-jarring thud, our descent barely controlled through the moon's dense atmosphere. Outside the viewport, a yellow-orange haze clung to the landscape, filtering the weak light of the distant sun. As we touched down, Jack let out a triumphant shout. "We did it, Doc. First humans on Titan." I smiled, but the moment was tinged with unease. There was something wrong about the place. I could feel it in the stillness of the air, the way the orange mist clung to the icy ground. We suited up, our protective gear designed to withstand Titan's extreme cold and toxic atmosphere. I remember standing at the airlock, staring out at the alien landscape, my breath catching in my throat. The surface was a barren mix of water ice and rock, its reddish-brown hue like dried blood. In the distance, the glassy surface of methane lakes shimmered, reflecting Saturn's ghostly rings. Jack went first, his boots crunching on the frozen ground. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with tension, as if the very ground beneath us was holding its breath. "It's incredible," I whispered, my voice trembling as I took in the view. The vast expanse of Titan stretched before us, unbroken except for distant, jagged ice formations that pierced the horizon. Jack's voice crackled over the radio. "Let's get to work. We've got a lot to do." The days blurred together in a haze of routine. We collected samples, conducted experiments, transmitted data back to Earth. But the unease never left me. Sometimes, while collecting soil samples, I'd feel a faint tremor beneath my feet. When I asked Jack about it, he'd shrug it off, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand would unconsciously tighten on his sample collector. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Jack and I sat in the habitat module eating rehydrated meals in silence. Jack stared at the wall, his eyes hollow. "You know what they say about explorers, Ilara," he said suddenly, his voice low. I looked up from my meal. "What?" "They say we're the ones who push too far. We go where we're not supposed to. We open doors that should stay shut." He chuckled darkly. "Maybe that's what we've done here." I frowned, unease prickling at the back of my neck. "You don't really believe that, do you?" Jack didn't answer. He just stared out the window, his gaze distant, as if he was searching for something in the dark void beyond. That night, I dreamed. In my dream, I stood on the surface of Titan, but it was different. The ice beneath my feet was translucent, and through it, I could see movement. Vast, shadowy forms shifting in the depths. I tried to run, but my feet were frozen in place. And then, slowly, agonizingly, the ice began to crack. I woke with a start, my heart racing. In the dim light of the habitat, I could see Jack sitting up in his bunk, his eyes wide and staring. "You saw it too, didn't you?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to speak, because in that moment, I knew. We weren't alone on Titan, and whatever was here with us, it knew we had arrived. A week later, we ventured to the southwestern ridge, our rover groaning as it crawled over the rugged terrain. Jack pointed at a towering ice spire in the distance, its jagged form reminiscent of Earth's Gothic cathedrals. "Reminds you of home, doesn't it?" he said, though his tone lacked the usual warmth. I nodded, though I could feel a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. As we continued on foot, the tremors I'd felt before grew stronger. Jack remained silent, but I could see the tension in his movements. We crested the ridge, and that's when we saw them. Monoliths, tall, dark, and ancient, rising from the frozen ground like sentinels, their surfaces glinting under the distant sun. My heart froze. They couldn't be natural, they were too precise, too deliberate. Someone, or something, had built them. "Jack," I whispered, fear seeping into my voice, "we're not alone here." For a moment, Jack said nothing. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he sank to his knees and began to laugh. It was a high-pitched, hollow sound that chilled me to my core. "We were never alone, Ilara," he muttered between fits of laughter. "We just didn't know." As the ground beneath us trembled again, something enormous began to stir beneath the surface. And this time, it was no illusion. The ice beneath our feet began to crack, spiderwebbing outwards from the base of the nearest monolith. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through our suits and setting my teeth on edge. "We need to get out of here," I said, grabbing Jack's arm. "Now." But Jack didn't move. He stayed on his knees, staring at the monoliths with a mixture of terror and recognition. "Don't you see, Ilara?" he whispered. "This is what I've been dreaming about. This is what's been calling to us." The humming grew louder, and the ground began to shake in earnest. In the distance, I saw the methane lakes start to churn, their glassy surfaces disturbed by something rising from the depths. "Jack, please," I begged, pulling at his arm. "We have to go." Finally, he seemed to snap out of his trance. He stumbled to his feet, and together we ran back towards the rover. Behind us, the ice continued to crack and split, the sound like 1,000 gunshots in the thin Titan atmosphere. We reached the rover and I threw myself into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I started the engine. Jack collapsed into the passenger seat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. As I gunned the engine, steering us away from the ridge, I glanced in the rearview mirror. What I saw made my blood run cold. Rising from the fractured ice, towering over the monoliths, was a vast, otherworldly form. It was like nothing I'd ever seen or imagined, a writhing mass of tentacles and eyes, its skin a shifting kaleidoscope of colours that hurt to look at directly. "What is that thing?" I gasped, my voice barely audible over the roar of the rover's engine. Jack's response was almost inaudible. "The Titans of Titan, the true rulers of this world. And we've just woken them up." As we raced back towards our habitat, the sky above us began to darken. Not with clouds, but with more of the creatures, rising from the methane lakes, emerging from crevasses in the ice. Titan, it seemed, was coming alive around us, and we were the intruders. We made it back to the habitat, but we both knew it was only a temporary reprieve. As I sealed the airlock behind us, my hands shaking so badly I could barely operate the controls, Jack slumped against the wall, his face ashen beneath his faceplate. "We need to contact Earth," I said, already moving towards the communication array. "We need to warn them." "It won't matter," Jack interrupted, his voice hollow. "Don't you see, Ilara? This is why we're here. This is what they wanted all along." I froze, turning to face him slowly. "What are you talking about?" He laughed, a broken sound that held no humour. "The dreams, the visions, they weren't warnings, Ilara. They were instructions." Jack's words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I stared at him, my mind reeling, trying to process what he was saying. "Instructions?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean, instructions?" He looked at me, his eyes haunted. "Think about it, Ilara. The dreams, the visions, they were too specific, too consistent. They weren't just random firing of neurons in deep space. They were messages." I shook my head, denial rising like bile in my throat. "Number, that's impossible. We're scientists, Jack. We don't believe in..." "In what?" he interrupted, his voice sharp. "In things beyond our understanding, in forces we can't explain. Look outside, Ilara. Tell me what you see out there can be explained by our science." I turned to the viewport, my eyes drawn to the chaos unfolding on Titan's surface. The sky was alive with writhing forms, their impossible geometries twisting in ways that hurt to look at directly. The ground heaved and buckled, methane geysers erupting in towering plumes that ignited in the atmosphere, casting an eerie, flickering light over the landscape. "This isn't possible," I whispered, more to myself than to Jack. "And yet, it's happening," he replied, his voice flat. "We were sent here to wake them up, Ilara. We're not explorers. We're harbingers." I turned back to him, anger flaring. "That's insane. Who would send us here for that? Why?" Jack's laugh was bitter. "Who knows? Maybe some shadowy government agency that's known about this all along. Maybe some cult that's been waiting for this moment for centuries. Does it matter? We're here. We did what we were supposed to do. And now? His voice trailed off, and I saw his gaze drift to the airlock. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what he was thinking. No, I said firmly, moving to block his path. We're not giving up. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to stop it. Jack's eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd known during our journey. Then it was gone, replaced by a resigned weariness. Stop it, he echoed. Ilara, we're ants trying to stop a tsunami. This is beyond us, beyond humanity. The best we can do now is... He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I could see it in his eyes. The best we could do in his mind was die. Die before whatever was happening outside reached us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. No, I repeated, my voice stronger now. I didn't come all this way to give up. We're scientists, damn it. We observe, we analyze, we understand. That's what we're going to do now. Jack stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, he said, his voice barely audible. What's your plan? I turned to our equipment, my mind racing. First, we gather data, all of it. Every sensor, every reading, every scrap of information we can get. Then we analyze. We figure out what's happening, how it's happening. And then, Jack prompted. I met his gaze, determination burning in my chest. And then we find a way to stop it. We pored over data readouts, analysed atmospheric compositions, studied seismic readings. On the surface, it all seemed like chaos, wild fluctuations in temperature, impossible atmospheric pressures, gravitational anomalies that defied everything we knew about physics. But as we dug deeper, patterns began to emerge. Look at this, I said, pointing to a series of readouts. These energy signatures, they're not random. There's a pattern here, a rhythm. Jack leaned in, his brow furrowed. It's almost like a heartbeat, he murmured. I nodded, excitement cutting through my fear. Exactly. And look here. I pulled up another set of data. These gravitational fluctuations, they're synchronized with the energy pulses. So, what does it mean? Jack asked, his voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and dread. I took a deep breath, my mind racing to connect the dots. I think what we're seeing isn't chaos. It's a system, a massive, complex system that's just waking up. Jack's eyes widened. The Titans, he whispered. I nodded slowly. They're not separate entities. They're part of something bigger, something that encompasses this entire moon. Maybe Titan itself is alive. The implications of that statement hung in the air between us, too vast and terrifying to fully comprehend. But if that's true, Jack said slowly, then how do we stop it? How do you kill a planet? I shook my head. We don't. We can't. But maybe we can communicate with it. Jack stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Communicate? With that? He gestured towards the viewport, where the sky was still alive with writhing, impossible forms. Think about it, I pressed on. If this is a system, then there must be a way to interact with it, a way to input information, to... I trailed off, a new thought striking me. The monoliths, I breathed. What about them? They're not just structures, I said, excitement building in my voice. They're terminals, interfaces. That's why they affected us so strongly when we approached them. They were trying to connect with us. Jack's expression was a mix of awe and terror. So what do we do? Go back out there and... What? Try to talk to them? I nodded, determination setting in. Exactly, but first we need to figure out how to speak their language. The next few days were a blur of feverish activity. We barely slept, subsisting on stims and protein bars as we worked to decipher the patterns we'd discovered. Outside, Titan continued its terrifying metamorphosis, but we forced ourselves to focus on the data, on the rhythms and pulses that seemed to underlie the chaos. "It's like music," Jack murmured on the third day, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "These patterns, these rhythms, it's a symphony on a cosmic scale." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. We'd been working on translating the energy signatures into audible frequencies, and the result was haunting. Ethereal tones that seemed to resonate on a cellular level, making the very air around us vibrate with potential. "But what's it saying?" I asked, frustration creeping into my voice. "We can hear it, but we can't understand it." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then slowly, he turned to me. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," he said softly. "Maybe it's not about understanding. Maybe it's about feeling." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He gestured to the readouts. "Look at these patterns. They're not just data. They're emotions. Vast, alien emotions, but emotions nonetheless. This rising pattern here, it feels like awakening. And this one, it's like curiosity." I stared at him, then back at the data, and suddenly I saw it too. The patterns weren't just rhythms or pulses. They were expressions of something vast and ancient, stirring after aeons of slumber. "Oh my God," I whispered. "We're not just witnessing the awakening of Titan. We're feeling it." Jack nodded, a glimmer of his old excitement in his eyes. "And if we can feel it, we can respond to it," I finished, my heart racing. We worked for another day straight, fine-tuning our makeshift translator. It wasn't really translating in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a device that could take our brainwaves, our emotions, and convert them into the same kind of energy patterns we'd observed from Titan. "Are you sure about this?" Jack asked as we suited up, preparing to venture out to the monoliths again. I met his gaze, seeing my own mix of terror and determination reflected there. "No," I admitted, "but it's our only chance." The journey to the monoliths was surreal. The landscape of Titan had changed dramatically, the once frozen surface now a roiling sea of liquid methane and heaving ice. The sky was alive with the writhing forms of the Titans, their impossible geometries seeming to bend the very fabric of reality around them. As we approached the nearest monolith, I felt a familiar pressure building in my head. But this time, instead of fighting it, I embraced it. I activated our makeshift translator and opened my mind. The world exploded into sensation. Colors. I had no names for, sounds that resonated in my bones, emotions so vast and alien they threatened to overwhelm me. I gasped, staggering under the onslaught. "Ilara!" Jack's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" I couldn't respond. I was lost in the torrent of sensation, of alien thoughts and cosmic emotions. And then, slowly, I began to make sense of it. Curiosity. That was the overwhelming feeling. Curiosity about us, about why we were here, about what we wanted. With an effort that felt like it might tear me apart, I focused my thoughts. I projected images of Earth, of humanity, of our journey to Titan. I tried to convey our own curiosity, our desire for knowledge, our hope for connection. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, like a tidal wave, came the response. Understanding, recognition, and something else. Something that felt like amusement. The pressure in my head increased, and I fell to my knees, dimly aware of Jack kneeling beside me, his hand on my shoulder. The world swam around me, reality seeming to bend and warp. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. I gasped, ripping off my helmet and gulping in the toxic Titan air. It should have killed me instantly, but somehow I knew it wouldn't. I turned to Jack, seeing the same realization dawning in his eyes. "We did it," I whispered, my voice sounding strange in the methane-rich atmosphere. We communicated. Jack nodded slowly, his eyes wide with wonder. But what did we say? What did they say back? I laughed, the sound bubbling up from some deep primal place inside me. They said, "Welcome." They said, "It's about time we showed up." Around us, Titan continued to change. But now I understood. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't destruction. It was transformation. And we, humanity, were part of it. As we stood there, breathing the impossible air of an awakened world, I realized that our journey hadn't ended. It had only just begun. Years have passed since that fateful day on Titan. Earth received our transmissions, our warnings, our pleas for understanding. For a while there was panic, fear of the unknown that had awakened in the outer reaches of our solar system. But fear gave way to curiosity, and curiosity to a new age of exploration. Titan is no longer a frozen, distant moon. It's a living world, teeming with forms of life we're only beginning to understand. The Titans, those vast, impossible beings we first encountered, are not our enemies. They're not even separate from us anymore. We've learned to communicate, to coexist, to merge our consciousness with the living essence of Titan itself. Humanity has changed, evolved in ways we never could have imagined. We're no longer bound by the limitations of our fragile earthly forms. Jack and I, we're still here, in a sense. Our bodies are long gone, but our consciousness lives on, merged with the vast, cosmic awareness of Titan. We've become part of something greater, something that spans not just our solar system, but reaches out to the stars beyond. As I look back on that terrifying, exhilarating moment when we first made contact, I realized that my initial dream came true, but not in the way I expected. I wanted to be the first to discover, to understand, to connect. And in a way, I was. We were. But being first wasn't a curse, as I once feared. It was a gift that opened up the universe to humanity in ways we never could have imagined. The Titans of Titan weren't our doom. They were our destiny. And as our merged consciousness reaches out to the stars, I know that our greatest adventures are still to come. Because out there, in the vast, uncharted depths of space, other Titans are waiting. Other worlds are dreaming, and we'll be there to wake them up, to join the cosmic dance that's been waiting for us since the beginning of time. This is Dr. Elara Chen, signing off from Titan. The next chapter of human history is about to begin, and it's going to be beautiful.